All right, we're live. Succession Story Podcast live on YouTube and LinkedIn today. I'm Laurie Barkman. I'm hearing an echo, so I'm just going to shut down one of my windows. So as we figure out the technical nature of this is a lot of fun. And anyway, I'm Laurie Barkman. So glad to be with my guest, Jacquelyn Core, who's part of the Lynch Law Group. I'm going to have her introduce herself in a second. This is the first time we're doing LinkedIn Live podcast. And so appreciate everybody watching. And this will also be a recording that we normally push out for the show. Today is about business owners thinking about their exit and the top 5 questions that they ask. So Jacquelyn, I'm just so excited that you're here with me to help our audience learn some really interesting things and get them thinking. So why don't we start by just introducing yourself?
Sure. So thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us on our new LinkedIn Live adventure. This is so much fun to be doing this today. So thanks for having me, Laurie. And I'm Jacquelyn Core. I'm a partner with the Lynch Law Group in the corporate practice group. And I focus my practice primarily on mergers and acquisitions. And we really try to bring sophisticated transactions for good value in the low middle market space. So bring experience and bring sophistication to smaller transactions for family business owners and people who are planning an exit like the ones we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and I'm CEO of SmallDotBig. It's an advisory firm for small, medium-sized businesses. I work with business owners to help them maximize the value of their company, anticipating a change in the future. I call myself a bit of a transition Sherpa. And it's a journey. Not everybody is saying, oh, I'm going to sell my business one day. A lot of people might not think that. They might think about really just building value. So regardless if you're anticipating a sale of your company or if you're thinking about, hey, I'm putting in all these hours, how can I really just maximize what I'm doing? This show will be for you. So why don't we get started? Jacquelyn, as we were thinking about the top 5 questions that come up, the top 5 questions that business owners ask about selling their company. The first one that comes up a lot, I know you had shared with me. Do you want to tee this one up?
Yeah. So, first of all, let me say that one of the things I think is so interesting and part of the reason that we did this, I think we should tell listeners, is because you and I hear the same questions. Right. And so whether you're working with somebody on the personal side to get them personally ready, or I'm working with somebody on the legal side, business owners who are starting to think about how do I make this transaction? Where do I even start? We hear the same questions. And so we were able to kind of come up with this list, like these are the things we most frequently hear, and also to try to structure them for listeners in a way that kind of maybe makes sense to take you through a little bit of a thought process about where do I start and even when do I start? And we're going to tackle some of those things. But one of the things that we really hear a lot, especially from family businesses, is how do I plan for this personally? So forget the business for a minute, forget the legal side of it. But as a human that has really put my heart and soul into this business, how do I even begin to get myself personally ready for this? And so that's something that you're so expert at, Laurie, and so adept at helping people with, that's a great thing for you to give our listeners some advice on.
Yeah, thanks. Why don't we start with that? Because the show, Succession Stories, on the show, I talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, CEOs, a mix of people who have started their business, and let's think of them as Gen 1, and then people who are Gen 2, Gen 3, and one of the recent episodes was Gen 10, which was a very, very cool episode. And so what we find a lot of times, and what I hear is this concept of a push versus a pull. And, some people say, I'm not leaving my business. I'm going to die with my boots on, meaning I'm going to work there till I'm 90. My name is on the door. I'm so proud of what we've created. There's a legacy, tradition, the culture, whatever it is. And people enjoy the freedom that comes with owning their own company. And over time, there's obviously life transitions. And so some folks are just really excited about staying in that company. So for those people who are so tied in, when they leave, it can be really, really difficult. The process of thinking about leaving is difficult. It's very emotional. Again, if their name is on the door, that's another factor. And so what we look at is really kind of 4 drivers of readiness. And the first one is both it's got two parts to it. The first is about this personal readiness. Are you personally ready for this transition and what it might mean for you on the other side? And this concept of a push versus a pull. There's some surveys that have been done that have showed the first year after someone has sold their company, a very high percentage, like 75%, are really not happy with that sale. And there's a number of reasons, why. But one of them we find is about this push versus a pull. Is there something pulling them to their next? And so is the owner ready for that change? Is the business ready for that change? So this readiness is a really big driver. The second one is this sort of future vision, which is tied in with that. And this future vision, how do they structure this flexibility? How do they structure of what's important to them? Kind of comes down to values. So values for you personally, how do you want to spend your time? I just did an amazing interview yesterday with someone who her business hasn't sold yet, but she wants to spend more time with family. And she's recognizing that in her 30 plus years of building her companies, multiple multi-million-dollar companies, she's not spent as much time with her family. And she just wants to take the time to do that. Other people want to start philanthropic efforts and decide with their family together what could be something together that's really meaningful. And so whatever that path is, there's no one path, certainly. Some people want to buy a company or start another business. And it doesn't matter what age you are. I'm involved with an organization called the Center for Ageless Entrepreneurs. And there are people who are in their 50s and older that are just excited to start a company. And so this concept of what's next and getting people energized for what's next is really important. So this personal ability to separate from your business and this identity that you have can be something that you take with you and that legacy you take with you. But for some people, it's really hard to separate. So that's a key thing that we have to really think through for, in this process. And the last thing is this team involvement. So how involved is your team in the process? Maybe it's not everybody, because you certainly don't want to reveal too much too soon. But if you have some key people that you count on that can be part of the deal process in a confidential way, it can be your family that's part of your team or team of advisors, people who you really trust, whether it's your attorney, your accounting firm, your maybe your wealth advisor, enlisting more people in your thought process. Folks like myself, hopefully you have some trusted advisors around you. It might be your board. Enlisting other people in your thought process and hearing their support and for you and your process, I think, is a big part of what can help prepare people personally for this transition.
And, there's two things in particular that I think we see often on the legal side that you hit on. And one is that sometimes that personal readiness doesn't mean I'm ready to lock the door and hand the keys to someone else and never step in the business again. And so that's something on the legal side in terms of personal readiness that we can kind of help with. What's that transition look like for you as a business owner, right? Are you going to stay on for a while? Maybe somebody's buying out the company, but you're going to stay on for a year as the CEO. Maybe you're going to continue in a sales role or in a development role with the company. Maybe you're going to stay on as a consultant in the company, right? And so it doesn't have to be this hard break. And sometimes that is something, that we help people work through. The personal transition on the legal side is, how do we structure your deal so that you can make that personal transition something that's positive, right? Where you don't feel like, yesterday I was in the company and today they've changed the locks.
Yes, right? Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so we see that. And then the other thing is that, this concept that you talked about of teams this is one of the reasons why early timing and like working with somebody like you early in the process is important, because sometimes there's so much dependence. Entrepreneurs are so fiercely, personally innovative, and they're such hard drivers and such hard workers that often they do everything. And so it becomes time to transition. And the company, you mentioned the company readiness. The company isn't ready because if you haven't been personally ready, you haven't started to give any of those things up, right? You haven't started to delegate. You haven't started to build that, the kind of team that would let you step back or step away. And so we see sometimes when people don't talk about the sale of their business until the day they're ready to sell, that they're really not ready to sell at that point because they don't have that team yet in place. And there's so much owner dependence that it even, and you and I have talked about this, that it even impacts business value.
Oh, absolutely. It's what we call the owner's trap, where the owner is the one who has the customer relationships. They want to make the customers happy. So they are customizing the delivery of the product or service to the extent that perhaps the owner is really the one that needs to deliver it. And then it's this kind of vicious cycle where they're not able to take that step back. One of the measures we look at is we ask people, what would happen if you were not in your business for 3 months? And people start to talk about how many hours they're working in a week and when was the last time they had vacation. There's one gentleman I've been speaking with, and he was in Florida. He had to fly back and do some customer quotes and then fly back to Florida because there was no one else on the team. So a lot of times it's the sales and marketing function, but can also be product and service delivery. And so, this owner's trap, companies are stagnating. And so it's certainly a risk, and it's certainly going to be something where someone's looking to buy your business and evaluating it. They're going to say, well, it's not worth as much because the owner isn't going to be there. And so what do we really have?
And on the legal side, when the buyers go through the legal diligence process, right, of that company, it's like, wow, the owner's name is everywhere.
Right.
Right. And so it's kind of one of those things that you can't really hide if you're doing everything. when the diligence of your company happens, people can get really nervous because there's so much of that owner dependence that it's like, can we really do this? Can we foster the same relationships with the customers? Can we deliver the same quality of service? Will people trust us? How long will that transition take because that integration is so close?
Yeah. I mean, another thing I think this leads us to is people wondering what they need to do to legally sell their company. So I'm going to tee this one up to you because you certainly see this all the time. You probably get that question a lot. And so tell us, what are some of those things?
And so I talked a little bit, I mentioned there the diligence process. And if you're listening and you're a business owner and you don't know what that means, basically when you go to sell your company, the buyers are going to look at all kinds of things. They're going to do a financial diligence or an accounting diligence and then a legal diligence. And so the financial accounting side, you get an accountant to help you through that. And that looks at your books, your P&L, your EBITDA, you make sure that your revenue is accurately reported, all those things. On the legal side, it is how is your company organized? Have you been following your governance procedures, right? What do your contracts look like? And so all of those things are things that then have to get negotiated. And so one of the things that we sometimes do with people who are getting ready to sell, or even people who might want to be ready, like people in the startup world who have a big rush of growth and they want to be ready in case an offer comes from private equity, right? Those people will then say, hey, can you help us be ready? And so we do what we sometimes call reverse diligence. So they don't have a buyer yet. They don't have a contract. They don't have anything, but we'll go in and look at all those things that a buyer would diligence in the process of purchasing the company. And we say, okay, these are the things you need to get in order. And particularly with generational businesses, like you were talking about, one of the things we see all the time is that sometimes people don't know, they know how to run the business. They are the expert at it. And they may have a very successful business and they still might not know where their company bylaws are, right? Or they don't know, they haven't done their required filings with the state, or their registered agent of service isn't updated. And these are technical things, but they're things that buyers are going to pick apart. And what you want is to get the deal done, right? When you finally decide you're personally ready to sell and you're going to give, kind of think of this as a 3-step process, maybe. What's my preparation as I come up to looking for a buyer or come up to getting ready for sale? And then I've got this negotiation that takes me through what's called the letter of intent. And that is the formalization of the basic terms. We'll give you this much money. You're keeping our employees or you're not. There's going to be a non-competition agreement or there's not. You're getting the IP or you're not. All those things get ironed out in that second process, that letter of intent process. Really important, because if things get missed there, even though large parts of that document aren't binding, you still kind of have agreed to those and pretty much get stuck with those. And then the third process being your actual transactional documents and going from your deal structure, however you've made that, all the way through to closing. And so if you think about that, that reverse diligence is all happens before the letter of intent, so that after the letter of intent, when you're trying to drive through all of those transactional documents and we're trying to get you to sale, you're not being held up by all of these little things. Where's your certificate of authorization? Why don't you have minutes? Don't you have any organizing resolutions? How do we know you have authority to do banking, right? All these little legal things, and those things can all slow the process. And, we say all the time kills the deal, right? So if you don't get the deal done efficiently, you don't want to cut any corners, but if you don't get the deal done quickly and efficiently, every time the other side has to come back to you and say, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a chance for the deal to break down. And so if you really know you want to sell, getting somebody involved who's an M&A lawyer, who has that kind of experience of doing mergers and acquisitions and knows what's going to be expected during that sale process, so they can take you back through that. So when you get to the end of that LOI, your diligence is like, people are like, wow, this is the cleanest company I've ever seen.
Have you ever had anyone come to you and with an LOI in hand, that they didn't work with you in advance? What happened?
Well, I tell everybody, look, we're and the smartest M&A advisors, right? And that's something that we can talk about. We can transition to talking about is this process of finding a buyer, right? But a lot of people get help. And so the investment bankers and the brokers in the Main Street market and the M&A advisors that are the best, they try not to let their clients do an LOI without legal counsel, which is really particularly dangerous if the other side has legal counsel and you don't, or if you're doing it with your lawyer that's been your family lawyer for many years, very trusted advisor, somebody you want to continue to work with way past your transaction, but maybe who doesn't have merger and acquisition experience. You can really give up a lot of things, right? And so sometimes it's fundamental deal structure things. Sometimes somebody will come and they'll say, well, we're doing it as a stock sale. It's like, well, this is a really heavy asset deal. You're not going to get any depreciation. And they haven't thought of it, but they've already memorialized it. And, particularly first-time buyers, one of the things about M&A is you talk about serial entrepreneurs, and those people certainly exist, but the vast majority of people are going to have one transaction or two, right? They bought a company and then they worked it their whole life and put their heart and soul and blood, sweat, and tears into it, and then they sold it, right? Their second transaction. So one buy and one sell. And some people who have a family business, they never even bought a company. So they haven't had any M&A experience, and now they're at sell. They're at the point of sell. And so you don't know what you don't know, right? And so having somebody involved, if you want to take the first step at, kind of drafting that, that's fine. But that's the point where you need to say, okay, I need a lawyer now. I need an M&A lawyer. I need somebody who understands before I sign on the dotted line and I commit myself, right?
Right.
And maybe you can talk a little bit, Laurie, about the process of, finding a buyer and what you go through to, how do you make that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the point that you're probably as a seller of a business, you're new at this, you haven't done it before. And it's very likely that the person across from you at the table or group of people have done this many, many times. So you have to be able to punch above your weight. And that's hard. How do we know how to do that? So having a group of advisors around you who've been through the process is certainly one way. Working on this, not in the sense of, oh, I'm going to sell tomorrow. I'm going to just put it on the market, kind of like your house, right? You want to get your house ready. It might take some time. You got to look at comparatives. You got to understand what a buyer might be looking for. Do you need to redo your kitchen? What's going to make your house more valuable than someone else? And it's kind of the same thing with your business. So how do you find a buyer? Really, it starts with, well, is your company ready to go on the market? And if the answer is yes, you've done all this amazing work. Let's say you've worked with somebody like me and we work on the 8 core drivers of value in your company. You feel personally ready. It's time. Okay, great. Now, one of those exercises is to look at who might want to buy your company. So that's one of the things that I would sit down with you and we talk about. There's different kinds of buyers. There might be somebody that you've already gotten to know. It might be a customer of yours that is really passionate about your business. I have, without revealing what company it is or anything, but there was somebody I've been speaking with, and he's in this situation. He wants to sell his company in a few years, and he said one of his customers has come to him probably at least 3 years ago. So this has been on his mind for a while, that he might sell to this customer because the customer shares the same passion for this service business. But there's other examples where it might be a strategic business partner. So if you go to market and you've created partner relationships, whether you're a software company or you're a service company, there's different kinds of partnerships that you might form. And you might find that there's a strategic need that they have to bolt on your business into their business. One could be because of market share. You help present some competitive differentiation for them. And so that's going to add a lot of value. But let's be real, when you're not in the room, they're going to go back to the boardroom or to their business, and they're going to have a conversation about, can we replicate this business? So it becomes a build versus buy. And so you want to be really well positioned for the buy, which is really kind of coming back to this, how differentiated is your business? What's unique about it? And what's the strategic reason that they would bolt you in? So that could be a strategic buyer in your industry. It may also be that there are institutional investors like private equity groups that have the same types of thought process of, am I going to buy this business and bolt it onto what we're doing, or are we going to try to one of our businesses is going to organically build it? So looking at your business through the lens of a third party is really helpful for that, to come up with a short list of who those 5-10 companies might be. Now, there certainly are intermediaries on the mergers and acquisition side that serve in a capacity to help you find buyers and broker these relationships. And there's a whole process that goes into that, which is essentially business development, right? We're trying to make a match here of a buyer and seller. But there's a lot of connections in the marketplace. Like I've interviewed people on my show that have talked about these amazing coincidental relationships where there was one episode, Will Connect came on the show and he talked about his company and how his father went to his accountant and said, I think I want to buy a business. And coincidentally, the seller had the same accountant and said, I think I'm ready to sell my business. And that accountant, this was probably 40 years ago, and made the introduction, and the rest was history. And that's August Wendell Forge Company. And there are lots of stories like that, where if you start to talk to your trusted advisors, whether it's wealth managers, or if you're seeking out people who are, specifically in M&A, they're M&A experts or they're business brokers, perhaps, they'll help you to think through, who a strategic buyer might be, or the types of buyers, different kinds of buyers that are out there that might be interested in your business. What do you see, Jacquelyn? What would you layer into this?
Well, one of the things I think that it's important to keep in mind is that occasionally your buyer is your competitor, right? And so we talk about aligning ourselves, like you might have a customer, or there might be somebody in your supply chain or somebody, but the reality is sometimes your buyers are your competitors, and you might not know your competitors directly. You may try to avoid your competitors at all costs, but it's a reason to be kind of plugged into your competitors, so that if you are going to sell, you can think about, well, what company are we competing against that we know, because we're competing against them, is really poised for growth, right? And can we go to those people and say, hey, we're ready to exit, or are you looking to grow by acquisition? And so that's one thing that we sometimes see. And then, you mentioned already one of the things that I think is most important, and that is this network of trusted advisors that really knows and understands the process and everything that goes on in it. Because, we just get, whether we want to or not, we get connected into that market, right? And so right now, you wouldn't have to spend a long time to fill a notebook page full of paper, if you think about it, of people who are selling businesses and people who are looking to buy one, right? And so We know those people. And so when you get to this place where you start to think you're ready, sometimes people want to kind of keep it a secret. And, I encourage people, if you really think you're ready, you need to start telling people you might be ready. It doesn't mean your business isn't still growing and you're not still focused on growth. It doesn't mean that you're not still driving hard, that you're not still providing great customer service, right? You can make clear we're not going to sell till we find somebody who's going to take excellent care of our customers, if you're worried about a customer impact. But I think that, letting people, at least in that trusted advisor circle, know, it's not like you have to take a billboard out, but letting people in that circle of advisors know that you're ready, those personal connections you're talking about, can get made there. And then the other thing, I love the analogy that you used about selling your house, right? And so I think it's the same with your car, or at least it's the same with my car, right? And so I'm the person who drives the wheels off my car, and I'm terrible about never washing it. If you see my car, it probably will need washed. And the inside, I live out of it some, so, it probably needs cleaned up a little bit, right? It's not terrible shape. It's not embarrassing. I could put a client in there if I needed to, but it's not pristine. But boy, when you're going to take it to the dealership and trade it in, what's the first thing everybody does, right? They either get it detailed, they pay somebody to do it, or they're out there with like Q-tips, right? Like cleaning the air vents, right? It's clean. It's the cleanest your car has ever been, is when you drive it to the dealership to try to trade it in, right? If you're going to sell your house, what do? You call the landscaper, right? You have them come plant flowers around the outside. You want it to look as good. You get people to stage it. You're concerned about how professional your photographs are. All those same analogies apply to the sale of your business. And, one of the things that I think is an underutilized resource when it comes time for sale, and guys like Taylor Abbott at Tailored Marketing is a great example of somebody who really kind of has their pulse on how, from a marketing standpoint, do we make sure that we're really putting our best company foot forward, right? When you put a coat of paint on the house, you're, at least hopefully you're not doing it to hide the structural cracks in the walls. You're trying to dress it up for the ball, right?
That's
so
right.
You want to do the same, for your business. And that might mean, like, if you have had a very successful business, but you have a web page that you made on Wix 10 years ago that might or might not have the right employees listed on it, like, you really want to get those things cleaned up, because what's somebody going to do if somebody comes to a buyer and says, hey, they have this business for sale, where's the first place that buyer's going to go?
Absolutely. They're going to go to that website. Absolutely.
Right? And so your marketing money is well spent, and it has to be with somebody who is kind of, I would say, a specialist in this kind of area, right? Like, not all marketing people know what it takes to sell a business, because they're not kind of connected into that M&A network. And like, that's why I mentioned somebody like Taylor, because, you really have this, you have somebody who understands the sort of the climate of it. But what better way than to do to your business what you would do to your car or what you would do to your house, right? To really get it ready so that when people take a look, it looks interesting. It looks inviting, right? You could see yourself in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just window dressing. If somebody's thinking, oh, I'm going to update my website and I'm going to increase the multiple of my business. Well, it's not a one-to-one like that. It's actually a number of things. And maybe that's a good segue to the next question that we have. And we can talk a little bit about what goes into the business value.
Yeah. And I will tell you that I love, your discussion that you share with people about the drivers of business value. We just talked a little bit about that. We talked about indirectly, because we talked about, the marketing of your company, but like customer satisfaction is one of those drivers. I think those are so important. So Laurie, maybe if you can talk a little bit about what those drivers of value are, I think that's a super part. I mean, I have things I can say and will say about, what people's businesses are worth, but that's a huge part of driving the value. Right?
Absolutely. And it's a process. It's just like anything. And for people that have built a successful company, that they're still gas in the tank, they want to still grow. That's great. It starts with looking at your business today, and we'll benchmark where you are today across 8 core drivers of value. And so a lot of times these strengths emerge. and we see, oh, great, out of these 8 drivers, here's the ones that you're doing kind of, you're doing well, and that's great. What could we do to enhance that? And then there's other drivers that maybe we haven't focused on yet. So I don't want people to think, oh, all this work I've done is for naught. No, absolutely not. We're just looking to build upon it and benchmarking where you are. So the 8 drivers, certainly it starts with financial performance and how the size of your company, it does matter, right? If you are a business that's under $1 million, under 5 million, under 10 million, the way that your business will start to be valued, lens number 1 is what's your revenue. Lens number 2 is your profitability. So your EBITDA, your performance over the last, 3+ years, how profitable your business is. And generally speaking, smaller businesses are worth less. Why? Because of this concept we were talking about earlier, which the owner is so involved in the business. And ultimately, what does a buyer want? A buyer wants a future stream of cash, of profitability, and what's going to make them believe in that future stream of cash flows is all the things that go into your business and all the things you're going to show them in the due diligence process. So what they're trying to figure out is reasons to discount that stream of future cash flows. And we want them to discount it a little bit. They're looking to discount it a lot, and that becomes the negotiation. And so as they evaluate your business across these drivers, they're looking for reasons to discount the amount that they're going to value your business at. So certainly the first one is your financial performance. It also includes the professionalism of your accounting. So for many businesses are using QuickBooks, and there's nothing wrong with that. But others who are preparing financial statements, they're using an accounting firm. Maybe they're going and getting audited financial statements. So there's a range of ways to present your financials to a potential buyer. The more organized and buttoned up they are, again, gives that believability as to why this buyer believes in your business and the numbers around it. So that's the first one. The next one has to do with growth potential. And so a business that has shown year-over-year growth is great. And so showing that history is certainly important. There's some interesting examples out there of some businesses that had a lot of success by getting a small number of customers for a high dollar value. So this one software company, as an example, got 2 customers, but each customer was $1 million. That's $2 million in revenue. And the 2 customers were Fortune 500. So there's another 498 out there. And so they needed to make a decision. Wow, we've seen some success in selling the software. Do we go after the other 498, or do we sell to a strategic buyer who has Fortune 500 companies and let them bolt this on? And that's what happened, and they got a huge multiple. So I realize not all companies are going to have that path, but that's just an example. So that's a growth potential. And what that's really saying is there's field left to plow. You want to show the buyer that if they buy your company, that they can bolt it into your business, and there's growth potential for them to benefit. The next one is we call the Switzerland structure, which is really about risk. And it's risk that you're not so over-reliant on any one group. Switzerland's known for its neutrality. And so we look at your business with this lens of how neutral you are. You're not over-reliant on one customer, supplier, or employee. And guess what? That employee might be you. So that can pose risk. And so what we would do is work on how to minimize the risk in that lens. The fourth one is cash flow. So we look at cash in, cash out in your business, the working capital needs. And this is sometimes as easy as looking at your policy of, well, how do you invoice clients? And sometimes it's industry driven, and sometimes it's just that, oh, wow moment, like, oh, I guess I could change this. So cash flow is certainly part of it. And are you borrowing, or is your business generating cash? The next one is recurring revenue. And so back to the big why, which is a buyer wants to have a consistent flow of profitability in the future. And so a more predictable source of revenue coming into your business, like subscription model would do, helps give that sense of that flow. And so a lot of businesses think, oh, well, recurring revenue models are just for software companies. And that's very common, of course. And services like Netflix, and we all benefit from that. It makes us happy, and we get to binge watch all we want. But there are opportunities to create a recurring revenue model. And so this is a really fun and interesting, kind of blends in with my marketing experience and go-to-market. I love working with clients on this module because there are opportunities. We just have to uncover what they are. The next one is monopoly control, which again, if I put my marketing hat on, also I think is a really fun module that I work on with clients, which is let's really figure out what your differentiation is. So monopoly control is about differentiation, and folks like Warren Buffett talk about this competitive moat that's deep and wide. So what's protecting your entrepreneurial castle from your competitors? And monopoly control is about this positioning you have. So you mentioned earlier, Jacquelyn, about your website. Well, yeah, let's look at that. And let's really look at not only does it look good, but what are we saying about ourselves, and how are we consistently showcasing that in all of our touch points through the marketing and sales process. And then the last two are one you've already touched on, which is customer satisfaction. Clients that are using the Net Promoter Score or something like that, which is objective, measured, and you can look at it over time. Those measures, which the great thing about NPS, Net Promoter Score, is it's used by some of the best brands in the world, and it's pretty well known. There's a lot of PE companies, private equity companies that look for metrics like your Net Promoter Score, because it's an easy way to compare. And it won't go into how it's calculated, but it's pretty easy to calculate. And it's just really getting into a rhythm of doing that with your customers on a regular basis. And ultimately, what we're trying to figure out is, are they willing to refer you to a friend or another, a colleague? And the answer to that question is very powerful. So it's about generating referrals. And we also look at churn, like how often what's your retention rate on your customers? So all those metrics go into this believability and predictability of your future cash flows. And then the last but not least category is hub and spoke. And hub and spoke is back to this theme we've been talking about, which is owner's trap, of the owner's in the center of everything. Maybe they're in the center of decision making. If somebody wants to do a price quote, or if they want to modify a service or product delivery, or sales and marketing, or HR issues, they're constantly bouncing back to the owner to decide. And so that's putting them in the middle. And what's happening again is, and it's somewhat surprising to people. They think, oh, I thought, one woman actually said to me, and it was like this aha moment. She goes, oh, I thought I was the differentiator. Now, after talking to you, I realized I'm the problem. And so this hub and spoke challenge that we have really is looking at the organization. It's looking at what are roles and responsibilities, what are roles you might not have in the company today that you might need to ultimately relieve you from this problem that you are depressing and holding your company back. How can we free you up, create more time in your day, make you more happy and fulfilled, and at the same time creates value in your business? It's kind of counterintuitive for owners that are so involved in their company. And I think, really? But yes, a business that cannot thrive without its owner is a worthless business.
You go through these 8 drivers, and the first thing that kind of hits people, if you're listening to us right now and you're thinking, okay, I might be wanting to sell, it's like, wow, a lot of these are financial, right? And so we're talking about the value of business, and many of them are financial. And there are a couple of things that we see on the legal side with frequency that can really impact those drivers. And one is the difference between operating your business and growing your business or preparing it for sale. And so, I jokingly sometimes tell people when they say, that they want to get ready for sale, stop deducting the toilet paper. And, it's like, and of course, sometimes I say, stop deducting the toilet paper you use in your house, right?
Right.
But really what it is it's this idea that operators, so when you are an operator and you're operating your business, what do you want to do? You want to maximize your deductions, right? Because the more deductions you have, the less tax you're going to pay. But the reality is that the other side of that is that you're minimizing your revenue, right? So what do you save by deducting that dollar on toilet paper? You save maybe 30 cents, right? In tax. And if you leave that dollar in the business 3 years later, you're maybe going to get a multiple of 3 or 4 or 10 or 12, depending on your industry. Which do you want, right? And so there are real kind of mind shifts that have to happen between I'm trying to run this in the way that is right now the most profitable for me, right? And this is, of course, most true in pass-through businesses where people are passing through the income, to themselves. But I'm maximizing for me right now to I'm maximizing for me 3 years from now, which might mean maximizing for the company right now. And so that, I think, is a hard mindset shift for people.
It is. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just something to really wrap their heads around. And then the other thing is, you mentioned the quality of the books. And I think sometimes people think, well, we don't have we don't have enough money to afford a controller or a CFO in our business. You can have quality books with QuickBooks. So even people who are using QuickBooks, you can get audited if you want. You can get audited financial statements off of QuickBooks. You have to use QuickBooks correctly. But, I think that realization for people that it's not that you have to be using one of the top accounting firms in the nation as your accountant to have quality books. That's not what quality books means. And so the education that you can help provide to people in this process of what that means, what's that really look like, right? What's that driver look like? How do I get there? So that's kind of some of the mystery is we can talk all day long about what are the 8 drivers, but the reality is, and the reason why I love your model so much, Laurie, is that most people don't know how to impact those drivers. Even if you can tell them all day what the drivers are, but it's like, but how do I change that? Right. And so that becomes that reason for why that group of trusted advisors becomes so important and why kind of a clarity of purpose, right, becomes important. And then lastly, why timing becomes so important, why it's too late if you're coming to you or coming to me and saying, I want to sell my business tomorrow. That's not the time to try to impact the 8 drivers of value.
No,
right?
Not at all.
And so I think, sometimes people have this psychological barrier to selling their business. A lot of that is surrounded by my name is on the door or my grandfather started it. In family businesses, it's really hard. Sometimes it is, I don't know what I'll do with myself, right? So we've come full circle back to all those personal things that you're talking about. But that makes people delay planning for selling the business, right? And so it's just get help processing those things so that you can plan to sell the business enough in advance, which is really, I say 3 to 5 years. And so I don't know, you can is that a similar time frame?
I do say 3 to 5 years also. And the way I talk about it is that it's like investing, right? If you're investing in the stock market or with your 401k, you're doing prudent decision-making on your savings now because you're going to benefit from it later. And you're going to benefit from this compound interest over time. It's the same thing for your business. Why wouldn't you work on these 8 core drivers starting today? Why wait? It's good, prudent business. It makes economic sense to do these things. And regardless of what your transition outcome is going to be, whenever that might be, you'll be ready and it's going to give you more options. And that's really the main point that I want to emphasize is having a business that is profitable, thriving, growing, that can thrive without you ultimately is the biggest value to you, because as an entrepreneur, why did you start your business in the first place? You're looking for this freedom and control of your time, decision to how you want to spend your time. That's our best commodity in our lives, right? As humans is time. And so ultimately, if you create a valuable company, it creates options for you. And that is immeasurable.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Without asking the question. We kind of transitioned here from what's my business worth to our fifth most frequently asked question, which is this concept of how do I know when I'm ready to sell, right? And so, I think what you talk about is right. It's like being, for people who know anything about angel investing, right? People who are angel investors, so they're early stage investors in startup businesses, they call their investments patient capital, right? You have to be patient for this to pay off. You're investing. You're not going to get it back tomorrow, right? You're planning for that business to grow and maybe those people to exit and then you to get money back. It's like patient capital investment in your own business when you're working on those 8 drivers, right? I might have to spend a little, right? I might have to change the way I operate the business. I might have to make sure I have the right people in the right seat, right? I might need, we didn't talk about that yet, other than, this reliance on the individual owner. But you talked a little bit about churn of customers, but there's also this churn of employees, right? And so what's your turnover rate look like? And really either end of that spectrum can be really terrible from a valuation standpoint. So buyers don't want to see nobody has left the company in 30 years, right? That sounds like a great thing. It's like, well, they're so stable, right? Nobody's left us in 30 years. That also means you have not had a new idea in 30 years, right? You might have people that are generating new ideas, but you haven't had fresh faces. You haven't had differences in perspective, right? And those things are things the buyers really look at. The other side of the coin is if you're flipping every employee in the business every year, now you don't have any history. You don't have any continuity. And also buyers are starting to wonder, what's wrong here? Right. What is it about this business or what is it about this work that is driving people to cycle through this business so quickly?
Yeah, because it represents risk. And someone who's doing the due diligence to look at your business, they're going to look at every angle to really uncover what the issues are. And you can't hide. They're going to find it, whatever it is. If there is a wart, they will find it. And it's, that's a whole other topic, I guess, is how to present those warts and rather than hide them and try to overlook them. But when it comes to being proactive and saying, wow, our culture has an issue, we need to start working on that. It's not because it's affecting your valuations, because it's affecting your business today. And so what you continue to invest on now, again, is going to benefit you in the future. But absolutely, your customer retention, your employee retention, what's the culture of your company? That's why I've had people come on the show that are in the quote unquote HR space, because ultimately what are our businesses? They are our people. And sure, we can automate and we have technology and we have all these wonderful, amazing, innovative things. But businesses are run by people and teams matter and your culture matters and your company's why, your vision, your mission, your values. That's where I like to start. I have one client, family owned, she's second generation. They never articulated their values. And she's kind of a skeptic to this stuff. She doesn't call it witchcraft or voodoo or anything, but she kind of did the eye roll of like, oh, okay, we'll go through the exercise and let's write down the values. So we articulated her values. It wasn't that painful. We went through it. And then after a week or two, actually this was around the holidays, she used it in a couple of different ways, which was so powerful and so impactful. One, she used it with some RFP meetings that she was having with clients to talk about her company and how they were different. And the values really resonated. And two, she used it with some key employee discussions around end of year, under end of year performance management and kind of setting up for 2021. And she said to me, Laurie, this was a really, really valuable exercise. I'm really glad we did it. And that meant a lot because again, she's kind of the eye roller, like, oh, why are we doing this? And so I think for companies that can really articulate their why, it showcases internally, it can bring people together around what's the purpose and what are we trying to accomplish as a team. But then also you can use it externally and perhaps it's on your website, in the right way, and it helps you in your positioning for your brand. So there's absolutely some things that you can do and work on that help influence, all of those things. And when it comes back to this question of how do I know when I'm ready to sell, sometimes a little bluebird comes and says, hey, I want to buy your company. And you weren't planning on it. And I won't go into too much detail, but this was the experience that I had when I was with a privately held company. There was a very large, very interesting bluebird that landed at our door, and we ended up being sold. And it wasn't in the cards initially. It was literally, they said, yeah, we've been looking at your business for years, and we were finally ready to approach you. And this company that I was with was ready. I mean, it was over 100 years old, and there was a lot of things that were buttoned up about it. It wasn't a small new company. So if you are excited about that prospect of one day getting a call like that, just like if someone says, hey, I want to buy your house. I mean, that does happen. And for the right number, for the right price, you might do it. And why not, why not be working on all those things to get ready? And so that way, again, back to options. If a bluebird comes and you want to be ready, then it takes time to get ready.
Yeah. And, I think you're right. There are very few things in the world that aren't for sale. And so if people come with the right price, I remember a story when I was working, I worked for a time, I think, as a CEO. And when I was a CEO, one of my board members told this story. He was an executive at a bank, and it was really the time where local banks were getting sucked up into larger banks. And so, there were all these bank workers that were kind of some of whom got displaced, and they were changing positions and changing banks, and all this stuff was going on. And there was a big meeting, and the bank management called everybody in, and they said, we are here to tell you the bank will not be sold. We will not sell the bank. And then he said, like less than 24 hours later, they got an email that said, the bank has been sold. And so, I don't believe in my heart that when he had that meeting with the employees, I'm sure he believed the bank would never be sold, right? But things happen. And sometimes they're unexpected, wonderful things. I have a call with a potential client this afternoon who contacted me because he said, we weren't looking to sell and we weren't looking for a buyer, but somebody who works in the same space came to us and started talking about how many synergies we could have if we merged with them. And now we're in negotiations all of a sudden. So you kind of never know, right, when it's going to happen. And that's one of the reasons I think, returning to what you said about culture, the culture is so important. Because it drives so many of these other things, right? And, we just went through this process at the firm where we redid our values and our mission and our vision. And the people who did it really spent a lot of time on it. But it's important to us, right? I mean, like one of our values is fun. We want it to be a fun place to work. And that might sound to some people like, seriously, you all sat down and you thought about your values and you came up with fun? Absolutely. Because you know what? We work really hard and, we intellectually, it's a demanding job. So we do want it to be fun. We want to get up and go there. We want the people who work with us to want to get up and come, right? We want our clients to interface with people who are really happy, right? Who enjoy their jobs, who are excited about serving clients. And so that drives the culture. Well, then what happens? That positively impacts your retention rate, right? If you're in a sales industry, it positively impacts your sales because who do you want to buy from? You want to buy from people who are excited about their job, excited about their business, right? And so it drives so many things. So that culture, I think you can't underestimate that.
Absolutely. Well, let's start to wrap up. And in summary, what were the 5 questions? So the 5 were, how do I plan personally for a business transition? 2, what do I need to do legally to sell my business? 3 was, how do I find a buyer for my company? 4 is, what is my business worth? And 5 is, how do I know when I'm ready to sell? So Jacquelyn, we covered a lot of ground, a lot of ground. And I'm just so appreciative that you've come on. And I think this is why you and I click. I think there's a lot of things that you and I see from the same vantage point, even though we come at it from different functional areas and expertise. But I really, really appreciate your insights. And as you know from listening to the show, that I love to ask my guests if they have any favorite quotes that you can share about entrepreneurship or leadership.
Yeah. So, boy, this is hard because I'm a person who loves quotes, right? So I think that, favorites quote, I think my favorite quote is probably a little known. Well, I don't know if it's my favorite, but one of the ones that's on the top of my head right now is a little known Thomas Jefferson quote that simply says, "Nothing was ever earned with hard work that was not backed by some measure of planning." So hard work is really important, and we know entrepreneurs do a lot of hard work, but I think it's an apropos quote for today, right? Because there is some planning involved. And so as we talk about planning the exit, from your business and what are the things that you might be considering, I think that's a great one for today. So I'll go with that one for today.
I love it. I love that quote. So if people want to learn more about you and what you do and connect with you, what's a great way for them to reach you, Jacquelyn?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is a great way to find me and connect, or through our website. So our website is www.lynchlaw-group.com. So a dash or a hyphen in there, lynchlaw-group.com. And my contact information is on the website. My contact information, including my cell phones, on my LinkedIn page. It's Jacquelyn Core. So if anybody wants to reach out to me there, I'm happy to connect with people there, and always happy to talk business with people.
That's great. And I know you and I have talked about some complimentary assessments that you do. Do you want to share that offer?
Yeah. So one of the things we do really at no cost to people is we'll spend some time with somebody who's thinking about selling. And so I just can't encourage people enough, if you are, and we also know other people who are trusted advisors who do that in other areas. Somebody who will talk to you about the accounting, or somebody like you who will talk about how to drive value. We've got a kind of a panel, if you will, of trusted advisors who work in this M&A space. But we're happy to get online with people, do a Zoom for a half hour, or an hour, and talk about your individual situation in your individual business and questions you might have about the sale process.
Absolutely. And as you know, Jacquelyn, I'm happy to participate in that with you. And to my audience, anyone who wants to reach out to me directly is always welcome to, for a strategy consult. So Jacquelyn, thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you so much for having the courage to be live. This was really fun.
It's been great.
And and thanks everyone for tuning in.